They say evil has many faces, but the truth is, most of them look ordinary. The most terrifying killers in history didn't hide in shadows or wear masks. They lived among us. Police officers, fathers, nurses, neighbors. They smiled in photographs. They blended in. And while the world went about its business, they turned life itself into a hunting ground. Tonight, we step deeper into the stories of the most evil serial killers of all time. Their names are whispered in fear, their crimes carved into history. But beneath the horror, there are details the world never knew. We begin, as we often must, in silence. The silence that comes just before a scream. He looked like a man you could trust, a police officer, a husband, a father, a man who waved to his neighbors as he left for work in the frozen dawn of Siberia. But when night fell over the city of Angarsk, Mikhail Popkov stopped being a man of the law. For more than 20 years, the region was haunted by a phantom, a killer who struck with the snowstorm and vanished with it. Women disappeared after dark. Days later, their bodies surfaced in forests and ditches, mutilated and half-buried beneath the ice. No one understood how such a murderer could move so freely in a city full of police. No one suspected that one of those officers was the killer. Popkov joined the force in the late 1980s. Quiet, polite, disciplined. He seemed the model policeman. He loved his wife and daughter, kept a tidy house, and drank tea with colleagues after patrols. Reliable, invisible. That invisibility became his greatest weapon. His crimes began with anger disguised as morality. He claimed he wanted to clean the streets, punishing women who drank, flirted, or stayed out late. But judgment soon turned into obsession. It was no longer about cleansing, it was about control. Using his badge as a mask, Popkov would stop women at night, offering them a ride in his police car. They trusted him. Who wouldn't trust an officer? He drove them to the edge of town, where the lights faded and the road turned to ice. Then he attacked. Some he raped, some he tortured, some he simply killed and left in the cold, as if the Siberian winter itself were his accomplice. He used knives, axes, hammers, whatever was at hand. He later said he liked watching the light leave their eyes. Then he went home, washed his hands, kissed his wife goodnight, and went to sleep. By morning, he put on his uniform and joined the search for his own victims. He offered theories, shook his head in disbelief, even attended funerals. He was the wolf in shepherd's clothing. The killings continued for years. Bodies kept turning up, strangled, stabbed, bludgeoned. Investigators called the killer the Werewolf. He struck with animalistic brutality, leaving behind chaos that made no sense. Each crime was different, each method unique. A deliberate tactic to make police believe they were chasing multiple killers. It worked. Popkov knew every step of their process: interviews, forensics, patrol schedules. He knew when they would stop searching, and he used that knowledge to keep killing. At home, he remained the perfect family man, strict but loving. He played chess with his daughter, helped with homework, and cooked dinner. He lived two lives so seamlessly that even he began to believe both were real. For nearly 2 decades, he went uncaught. Then, in the early 2000s, the murders stopped, not from guilt, but from injury. After leaving the police due to an accident, Popkov took a job as a security guard. He believed he was untouchable, but time and technology were catching up. In the year 2012, Russian investigators reopened old cases using new DNA techniques. They collected samples from former officers and suspects. Confident he had nothing to fear, Popkov volunteered his DNA, even joking that the police would never find the werewolf. When the results came back, they pointed straight to him. His DNA matched multiple victims. When officers arrived at his home, his wife smiled, thinking it was a friendly visit. They handcuffed him in front of her. She froze, unable to speak. During interrogation, Popkov stayed calm. He confessed immediately, first to 22 murders, then 25, then 40. Eventually, he described more than 80. He recalled every killing in chilling detail, the routes he drove, the words his victims spoke, the tools he used. His memory was perfect, his conscience gone. He told investigators he felt no remorse because his victims deserved it. When asked if he understood he was a murderer, he replied, "I am a cleaner." In court, he sat motionless while families wept around him. He nodded politely, even smiled when the judge read his sentence: life imprisonment. He He thanked the court for their time. In prison, guards described him as quiet, polite, and helpful. He read books, exercised, and spoke fondly of his daughter, who still struggled to believe her father's crimes. When a journalist asked if he thought he was evil, Popkov replied, "Evil is a matter of opinion." To this day, no one knows the exact number of women he killed. Some investigators believe it may exceed 100, but the numbers hardly matter anymore. What remains is the lesson that trust is fragile and monsters do not always hide in darkness. Sometimes they wear badges. Sometimes they shake your hand and promise to protect you. Mikhail Popkov called himself a servant of the law. In truth, he served only himself. The quiet hunger that drove him to destroy life after life, believing he was purifying the world. But the world did not need cleansing, only he did. Now, as the Siberian wind howls outside his prison walls, the man once called the Werewolf sits in silence, a predator finally caged, still convinced he was right. Where Popkov believed his crimes were righteous, another killer knew exactly how wrong his actions were. He lived a quiet life in Anchorage, Alaska, a husband, a father, the friendly neighborhood baker. To everyone around him, Robert Hansen was shy but kind. He baked pastries for church events, waved to neighbors, and spent weekends hunting in the vast wilderness beyond the city. No one imagined that when he left home with his rifle, he wasn't hunting animals. He was hunting women. For more than 10 years, between the early 1970s and the 1980s, Hansen lived a double life. By day, he ran a small bakery. By night, he became what police would later call the butcher baker, a man who kidnapped, assaulted, and murdered women, then buried them in the frozen forests of Alaska. He looked so ordinary that when women began to vanish, police didn't connect the dots. His victims were often dancers, sex workers, or hitchhikers, people society ignored. Anchorage, booming with oil money and transient workers, was full of strangers. Disappearance was easy, and that made them perfect prey. Robert Hansen chose victims no one would miss. He was born in Iowa in 1939. From childhood, he was small, shy, and constantly bullied. He stuttered when he spoke and resented those who laughed at him, especially women who rejected him. By his late teens, resentment turned into obsession. He wanted power over those who had made him feel weak. After high school, he joined the Army Reserves and later moved to Alaska with his wife. He opened a bakery and seemed to build a respectable life. But beneath the surface, bitterness still grew. He began visiting strip clubs and brothels, paying for affection he couldn't earn. Soon, even that wasn't enough. He wanted fear. At first, his crimes were small: theft, arson, lies. He was arrested more than once, served short sentences, and always returned to normal life. He hid behind politeness, using charm as camouflage. His wife defended him. His neighbors called him quiet and hardworking. That illusion protected him. Robert Hansen planned everything. He approached women downtown, pretending to be friendly, offering money for photos or private dancing. Once they agreed, he pulled a gun, handcuffed them, and drove them to his small plane, a bright blue Piper Super Cub. He told them he was taking them to his cabin outside the city. He wasn't lying, but they would never return. In the wilderness, Hansen became something else. He would assault the women, then release them into the forest, barefoot, terrified, freezing, and tell them to run. Then he picked up his rifle, tracked them through the trees, and killed them like prey. He knew every ridge and stream, turning Alaska's wild beauty into his hunting ground. When police later searched his home, they found a map with small red marks, 24 in total. Each mark was a grave, each grave a woman. He kept their jewelry and driver's licenses as trophies, hidden in a secret drawer behind his bed, and every morning, as he baked bread for his family, those trophies were only a few steps away. The investigation was slow. In the early 1980s, bodies began appearing in shallow graves outside Anchorage. Each victim had been shot with a hunting rifle and buried in remote areas reachable only by plane. But in a place as vast as Alaska, clues vanished beneath the snow. Then, in 1983, a 17-year-old girl named Cindy Paulson escaped. She had been kidnapped, chained, and assaulted. When Hansen left her alone to prepare his plane, she fled barefoot through the streets and flagged down a passing driver. Her courage broke the case open. At first, police didn't believe her. How could the quiet baker be a sadistic killer? But her description of Hansen's home matched perfectly. the trophies, the basement, the hidden drawer. Investigators obtained a warrant. What they found confirmed everything she said. Inside, they discovered the map of burial sites, weapons, and personal items belonging to missing women. Hansen denied everything until the evidence became impossible to refute. Then, almost with relief, he confessed. He told detectives he killed because he loved the hunt. He said that when the women ran, their fear made him feel powerful, power he never had as a boy. He admitted to 17 murders, though police believed the number was closer to 30. In 1984, Robert Hansen was sentenced to more than 400 years in prison. He died there 3 decades later, at the age of 75. When asked if he felt remorse, he said, "They were just women who had nothing else to lose." He could not have been more wrong. They had everything to lose. Their lives, their futures, their voices, all stolen by a man desperate to feel strong. Robert Hansen's story remains one of the most haunting in American history, not only for its brutality, but for its ordinariness. He didn't look like a killer. He didn't act like one. He smiled at customers, handed cookies to children, and lived in the same quiet neighborhood as his victims. Yet when he looked at the wilderness beyond his city, he didn't see beauty. He saw opportunity. They called him the Butcher Baker because he lived between two worlds, the warmth of home and the frozen cruelty of the hunt. He proved that the most terrifying monsters don't always hide in darkness. They grow quietly in daylight, behind small kindnesses, until no one notices the blood on their hands. In the end, Robert Hansen wasn't hunting women. He was hunting the illusion of power he had chased his entire life. And when he finally found it, he used it to destroy everything human within himself. Where Hansen was hunting illusions, another killer used the power of magic to hunt something else: immortality. In the heart of North Sumatra, Indonesia, where rice fields shimmer beneath the tropical sun and superstition lingers in the air, there lived a man who claimed to speak with spirits. His name was Ahmad Suradji. To his neighbors, he was a healer, a mystic who could bless crops and lift curses. But behind his calm smile hid a darkness beyond belief. He was known as the Black Magic Killer, and he believed that murder would make him immortal. For years, villagers came to Ahmad for help. They wanted love, luck, protection. He told them the spirits demanded a ritual, and that to cleanse their souls, they must lie in the earth. He led them to shallow graves, asking them to trust him as he covered their bodies with soil. Then, when only their faces remained above ground, he wrapped a cable around their necks and strangled them. He said their spirits would serve him. Afterward, he drank from their saliva, believing it gave him power. Between 1986 and 1997, he killed at least 42 women, perhaps more. He buried them in a circle around his home so their souls could guard him. Ahmad was no scholar. He was a cattle breeder, raised in poverty and steeped in folklore. In his world, spirits were real, and dreams carried commands. He said that one night, his dead father appeared in a dream, telling him to kill 70 women and drink their essence to gain supernatural power. Ahmad believed it was destiny, and he obeyed. Each killing followed the same ritual. He chose women who trusted him, promised healing, and buried them alive in the sugarcane fields. He told himself it was not murder, it was sacred work. He did not act alone. Ahmad had 3 wives, 2 of them sisters. He convinced them his actions were holy, that he was chosen by the spirits. One helped lure victims, another helped bury them. Fear and faith kept them silent. Together, they built a life around death. For more than 10 years, no one noticed. The women he killed were poor and came from faraway villages. Families thought they had moved to the city. The fields hid everything. Until 1997, when a farmer found a shallow grave. Police uncovered one body, then another. The trail led straight to Ahmad's house. At first, he denied everything, but as officers dug through his fields, the truth surfaced. Dozens of corpses lay buried in a perfect circle around his home, all facing him. He watched calmly as they were unearthed. He said he had done nothing wrong, that he was fulfilling a divine command. In court, he described his rituals without shame. He spoke of dreams, spirits, and power through death. He said each woman's soul brought him closer to perfection. When asked if he felt guilt, he said, "They were already meant to die." The courtroom fell silent. His wives were sentenced to prison. Ahmad Suradji was sentenced to death. He accepted it without emotion, saying his journey on Earth was complete. On July 27, 2008, he was executed by firing squad in a field not far from his home. Witnesses said he walked calmly, whispering prayers. He did not scream or beg. He simply closed his eyes, perhaps waiting for the spirits he thought would welcome him. After his death, locals refused to touch the land. They said it was cursed. At night, strange lights flickered across the fields, and some claimed to hear voices crying beneath the soil. Ahmad Suradji's story is a collision between faith and madness. He wasn't a killer driven by rage or greed. He was consumed by belief, a man who turned religion into ritual murder. He saw himself as chosen, not evil, but his faith was only a mirror for his hunger, the desire to feel powerful in a world that had made him small. He found his God in death, in the silence of the earth closing over his victims, in the circle of graves surrounding his home. They called him the Black Magic Killer because his evil was wrapped in ritual, but behind the spells and myths was something terribly human, the belief that power can justify anything. In the end, Ahmad Suradji found no immortality, only darkness, and the whispers of the women he buried will forever haunt the land that fed his madness. Where Suradji sought power through death, the next killer used silence to play a deadly game of chess. In Moscow, the birch trees of Bitsa Park whisper over cracked concrete paths and forgotten benches. It feels ordinary, peaceful even. But beneath that stillness, a secret haunted the city for years. A secret born from a man who wanted to turn life into a game. His name was Alexander Pichushkin. He called himself the Chessboard Killer. He wanted to kill 64 people, one for every square on a chessboard. He came close. Alexander was born in 1974 in a gray Soviet apartment block south of Moscow. As a child, he was bright but withdrawn. He fell from a swing and struck his head, suffering brain injury doctors said might change his impulse control. After that, he was different, short-tempered and unpredictable, fascinated with violence. At school, he was bullied and isolated. Only chess brought him comfort. He could sit for hours, planning moves ahead, feeling a steady sense of control. To him, chess was not just a game. It was a way of thinking, a map of domination. When his grandfather died, the man who had shown him any warmth vanished from his life. Alexander sank deeper into loneliness. He began to drink and wander Bitsa Park at night. The park became his hunting ground. His first known murder happened in 1992. He invited a former classmate to the park to drink in memory of a lost friend. Instead, he struck him over the head with a hammer and pushed the body into a sewer pit. He later called it an experiment. He wanted to feel what killing was like. He liked it. After that, he did not stop. He said murder made him feel alive. It gave him power and meaning. He did not kill from sudden rage or revenge. He killed because he enjoyed the planning, the precision, the ritual. He often targeted the most vulnerable, homeless men, elderly, pensioners, people who trusted a friendly face. He offered vodka and company, led them into the woods, and when they were drunk, he struck with a hammer. Sometimes he used a broken bottle to quiet the wound. He wanted silence, not mess. He filmed some of his victims before and after the killings. The camera was steady, almost clinical. The footage showed him laughing, drinking, pretending friendship. Then it showed the lifeless body, the empty eyes. The recordings were not frantic, they were methodical, proud. Each death, to him, was a move on a chessboard. Each victim a piece to be sacrificed. Over time, his methods grew bolder. He left small clues as if daring the police to find him. He wanted recognition. He wanted his masterpiece noticed. The number of murders grew. 30, 40, 50. He kept a small chessboard as a record. He filled squares with dates of killings. By the time police caught him, 61 squares were marked. Alexander later claimed he had killed more, saying the true total was 83. He said he would have continued until the board held all 64 squares, and then perhaps begun another game. For Moscow police, his capture began almost by accident. In the year 2006, a young woman named Marina Moskalyova disappeared after leaving work. Her last call was to Pichushkin, a coworker. When investigators traced her movements, they found his name and phone number in her apartment. They brought him in for questioning. Within hours, his composure crumbled. He confessed calmly and even guided detectives to sites in Bitsa Park, like a man showing a gallery. At each location, he described the kill in detail, the conversation, the strike, the fall. He smiled when bones surfaced. He told police, "I was the father of these people. I gave them their final lesson." The confession was complete, clinical, without remorse. In court, Pichushkin became theatrical. He spoke of murders as art, each designed and perfect. He claimed his victims were nothing and that he killed with purpose. He argued human life was meaningless, that death was liberation and evolution. To him, the killings were strategy, not sin. When the court sentenced him to life imprisonment without possibility of parole, he did not flinch. He only asked for a chessboard in his cell. The request was denied. Today, Alexander Pichushkin sits alone in a small concrete cell in one of Russia's highest security prisons. He reads, writes, stares at the wall. He has never apologized. He has never shown genuine remorse. When journalists ask why he did it, he replies, "I like the feeling of ending a life. I wanted to be God for a second." Guards say he remains calm and polite, explaining his crimes as if solving a puzzle. In his mind, perhaps they make sense. To Alexander Pichushkin, life was never about love or morality. It was about strategy and power and the quiet satisfaction of a planned move. He once said killing made him feel complete, that each death filled an empty square inside him. But there is no final checkmate for a man like him. There is only the echo of his own game, played in darkness, forever unfinished. In the city, the birches still whisper. Bitsa Park remains ordinary by day, but for years it held a terrible record of choices, a grid of lives erased one by one. The chessboard that Alexander filled will not be cleared. It is a map of absence, a reminder that the most methodical monsters wear ordinary faces, and that a game played without mercy creates only loss. In Germany, hospitals are places of order, white walls, quiet corridors, and the rhythmic pulse of machines keeping time with fragile lives. They are meant for healing, for hope, for safety. But for years, one nurse turned those places of care into corridors of death. His name was Niels Högel. They called him the Death Angel. He didn't look like a killer. He looked like every other nurse, calm, polite, ready with a reassuring smile. Patients trusted him, colleagues respected him. He seemed devoted, even kind. But behind that professionalism hid an addiction not to drugs or money, but to power. The power to decide who lived and who died. Högel began working in the 1990s in the city of Oldenburg, northern Germany. At first, he was competent and reliable. Then, something changed. Patients who had been stable suddenly went into cardiac arrest. Sometimes he saved them, sometimes he didn't. Doctors praised his composure. No one asked why so many crises happened on his shift. He later confessed that this was the thrill he wanted, the applause, the heroism. He said the rush of bringing someone back from death made him feel alive. But to feel that rush, someone first had to die. His method was simple. He injected patients with heart-stopping drugs like Chameleon and lidocaine, safe in small doses, deadly in excess. After injecting them, he waited for alarms to sound, then rushed to save them. If they lived, he was a hero. If they died, he quietly moved on. By the early 2000s, whispers spread among the staff. Too many sudden deaths, too many coincidences. Nurses joked nervously, "If Högel is on duty, someone will die." But no one reported him. Hospitals feared scandal. Instead of confronting the truth, they transferred him. At his new post in Delmenhorst, the pattern continued. Cardiac arrests, unexplained deaths, irregular charts. Still, he remained untouched. He spent long hours in the intensive care unit, surrounded by the blinking machines that gave him control. Later, investigators would find that patients were 5 times more likely to die when Niels Högel was working. In 2005, he finally slipped. A nurse caught him injecting a patient who had no prescription. Minutes later, the patient went into cardiac arrest. This time, he couldn't hide. He was arrested for attempted murder. At first, police thought it was an isolated act. Then, as they searched deeper, they uncovered a pattern that spanned more than a decade. Bodies were exhumed. Toxicology tests revealed the same drugs again and again. The scale was unimaginable. Högel's calm facade began to crack. He confessed to some killings, then to more, until investigators lost count. He eventually admitted to at least 90 murders. Evidence suggested the real number could exceed 300. It made him the most prolific serial killer in modern German history. During his trial, Högel spoke with disturbing precision, describing every injection, every code blue, every attempt at resuscitation. He said he was addicted to the adrenaline, the moment between life and death. Sometimes he wanted to save them, he claimed. Other times, he simply wanted to watch them die. When asked why, he said, "Because I could." He sat in court wearing a green prison uniform, glasses perched neatly on his face, speaking softly and politely. He apologized to the families, though his voice carried no emotion. He said he missed the feeling of control. His words chilled the room. One prosecutor described him as a man who played God in the most horrific way imaginable. In 2019, he was sentenced to life in prison. The judge said his actions were beyond comprehension. Not the work of a healer, but of a predator hiding in plain sight. Outside the courthouse, families held photographs of their loved ones. Mothers, fathers, grandparents. People who had entered the hospital to heal and never returned. Some wept. Others stared silently at the man who had stolen so much. Inside his cell, Niels Högel lives quietly. He reads, writes, and sometimes gives interviews to psychologists studying his case. He says he still dreams of the hospital, the soft lights, the steady beeping of monitors, the sudden silence after a final breath. He says it feels like home. What makes his story so horrifying is not just how many lives he took, but how long he was allowed to keep taking them. Hospitals moved him instead of stopping him. Colleagues doubted their instincts. Administrators buried evidence to protect reputations. And through that silence, he thrived. Evil, after all, doesn't always hide in darkness. Sometimes it wears a name tag and a clean uniform. Niels Högel called himself a nurse, but he was a man addicted to the instant between life and death. A man who turned compassion into theater and killing into performance. He wanted to be the hero, the savior, the one who could cheat death. But in chasing that illusion, he became death itself. "I never wanted anyone to suffer," he once said, yet hundreds did, quietly, trustingly, beneath his care. Now, in the stillness of his prison cell, the man once known as the Death Angel has nothing left to control but his own breath. No alarms, no syringes, no audience, only silence. And perhaps, in that silence, he finally hears what he spent his life trying to ignore. The echo of every heartbeat he stopped. We move from heartbeats stopped to breaths taken, and from sterile corridors to the heat of African streets, where another killer waits in the shadows. In the years after apartheid, South Africa was rebuilding, wounded, divided, and hopeful. But while the nation looked toward healing, one man quietly turned that hope into fear. Between 1994 and 1995, more than 38 women were found strangled near Johannesburg, Boksburg, and Pretoria. Their bodies were left in fields, factories, and abandoned buildings. At first, police thought there were several killers. There was only one. His name was Moses Sithole. They called him the South African Strangler. Moses grew up poor in the township of Vosloorus. His father died when he was young, and his mother, unable to feed her children, left them at an orphanage. There, he said, he was beaten and humiliated. It taught him never to trust kindness. By his teens, that anger had hardened. He left the orphanage and found work as a laborer, and later as a security guard. He was quiet, polite, always neatly dressed. But in 1987, the mask cracked. He was arrested for rape and spent almost 7 years in prison. When he was released in 1994, South Africa had changed. Nelson Mandela was president. The nation was filled with hope. But Moses carried only resentment. He said prison had destroyed him, that he had been assaulted there. When he walked free, he was consumed by hatred, especially toward women, whom he blamed for everything. And so, he began to kill. His method was simple. He posed as a recruiter for a charity helping single mothers find work. Many of his victims were poor and desperate. He looked professional, spoke softly, and carried fake documents. He told them to meet him for an interview at a nearby factory or office. Once they followed, he led them to an isolated place, a field, an abandoned building, a patch of empty land. There, he turned. He bound their hands, raped them, and strangled them with their own clothing. Some he covered with branches, others he left exposed, like trophies. As bodies appeared across Gauteng province, fear spread. The newspapers called him the ABC Killer because many victims were found in Atteridgeville, Boksburg, and Cleveland. Police faced enormous pressure. The new South Africa promised safety, but this killer made it feel lawless again. Investigators mapped scenes, compared evidence, and hunted patterns. Still, Sithole stayed ahead. He changed locations, killed quickly, and moved through poor areas where police rarely patrolled. By late 1995, more than 30 women were dead. Some were pregnant, most were mothers. All had trusted him. When detectives finally connected the cases, they realized the man behind the killings was already in their system, a convicted rapist who had disappeared after his release. A nationwide manhunt began. Sithole fled from Niels, town to town, hiding with friends and relatives, charming strangers into helping him. He was intelligent, articulate, and manipulative. Even when people recognized him from the news, he could talk his way out. But in October 1995, police cornered him at a friend's house in Johannesburg. When officers surrounded the property, he attacked with a machete. They shot him in the arm and leg before arresting him. Lying on the ground, he smiled and said, "You caught me too late." At the station, he confessed freely, not with shame, but with pride. He described each killing in detail, correcting investigators when they got dates wrong. He said he killed because women thought that they were better than men. He said they deserved it. When asked about guilt, he replied, "Why should I feel any?" During his trial, the courtroom was packed. Families, journalists, and citizens came to see the man who had terrified their country. Sithole sat calmly, sometimes smirking, as prosecutors listed his crimes: 38 murders, 40 rapes, and 6 robberies. He showed no emotion. "I have nothing to say," he told the judge. Forensic evidence sealed his fate. His fingerprints, his semen, his clothing, everything matched. In December 1997, Moses Sithole was sentenced to 2,410 years in prison, the longest sentence in South African history. He would need to serve more than 900 years before being considered for parole. The courtroom erupted in applause. Sithole didn't react. He only said, "That's fine, I'm already dead inside." He was sent to C-Max prison in Pretoria, a facility for the most dangerous criminals in the country. There, he spends 23 hours a day in isolation. Guards say he often smiles, a small, empty smile that never reaches his eyes. Even after decades, they describe feeling uneasy in his presence, as if the darkness inside him still lingers. The story of Moses Sithole is not only about murder, it is about betrayal, of trust, of hope, of a nation learning how fragile safety can be. He exploited kindness and turned compassion into bait. He used the promise of work to lure women toward death. He once said that he believed the spirits of his victims still followed him. But perhaps what haunted him was not their souls. It was the silence after the screams stopped. The moment he realized the power he craved had left him emptier than ever. They called him the South African Strangler, a man who killed with charm and lies instead of weapons. He didn't hunt in darkness. He hunted in daylight, wearing a smile and holding an offer of work. For dozens of women searching for a better life, that smile was the last thing they ever saw. From the streets of South Africa, where lies became weapons, we move east, to Ukraine, where the next killer hunted not with words, but with the mind of a beast. In the quiet villages of rural Ukraine, life once moved slowly. Families gathered at kitchen tables. Children played in the snow. Doors stayed unlocked because everyone knew everyone. But between 1989 and 1996, that peace was shattered. Entire families were found dead. Parents, children, even their pets. Their homes were burned to the ground. The police had never seen anything like it. The man behind it was Anatoly Onoprienko, known to the world as the Terminator. Anatoly was born in 1959 in the small village of Lasky, near Zhytomyr. When he was 4, his mother died. His father sent him to an orphanage, where he grew up alone and unloved. He later said those years turned him into something cold. "If you are not loved as a child," he once said, "you don't learn to love, you learn to survive." At 18, he joined the merchant navy, traveling across the world, but finding no peace. When he returned to Ukraine, he was angry, restless, and convinced that life owed him more. His anger became hunger, and that hunger became death. His first known murders came in 1989. He began by ambushing drivers on lonely roads, shooting them with a stolen shotgun and taking their money and cars. But robbery stopped satisfying him. Soon he wanted more than control. He wanted destruction. He started breaking into homes at night, killing everyone inside. He spared no one, not children, not infants. He said he wanted to erase witnesses, but it was clear he enjoyed the slaughter. He drove from village to village, sometimes hundreds of kilometers apart, watching for houses with lights still burning. He shot families in their sleep, then set the homes on fire. If anyone escaped, he chased them down. Sometimes he even killed neighbors who came to help. The newspapers called him the Beast of Ukraine. The police called him unstoppable. For 7 years, he terrorized small towns. Fear spread like smoke. Families slept with axes by their beds. Children whispered his name like a curse. Ukraine was in chaos after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Police forces were underfunded, evidence was lost, and communication between regions was weak. Onoprienko used that chaos as cover. He knew the roads, the forests, and the flaws in the system. Sometimes, after killing an entire family, he would stay in their home, eating their food, smoking their cigarettes, listening to their radio. He said later that those were the moments he felt calm. In 1995, the killings peaked. He slaughtered entire households almost weekly, sometimes leaving 9 bodies in one night. Police formed a national task force, but the clues were few. Desperate for answers, they arrested innocent men, while the real killer kept moving. Then, in April of 1996, a villager near Zhytomyr saw a suspicious man and alerted the police. Days later, officers found Onoprienko asleep in an abandoned house. Beside him was a shotgun and a sack filled with jewelry, documents, and cash from his victims. When they woke him, he didn't resist. He simply said, "Yes, it was me." What followed was one of the most chilling confessions in history. Over several weeks, he described every killing in detail, 52 victims in total. Sometimes he said voices told him to kill. Other times, he said he killed for revenge or power. He told investigators that God had chosen him to cleanse the world of sinners. To him, each family was a symbol of greed and corruption. Remorse, he said, they were insects. I was the exterminator. His trial in 1999 drew global attention. Families of victims filled the courtroom. He sat expressionless as prosecutors read the charges. 52 murders, 17 robberies, multiple acts of arson. He didn't deny a thing. He said his only mistake was leaving witnesses alive early on. The prosecutor called him a man without a soul. Psychologists said he had no empathy, no conscience, no fear. One expert called him a machine built for death. When given a chance to speak, Onoprienko stood and said, "I am not insane. I am pure. I am chosen." The courtroom erupted in outrage. He didn't care. He looked proud, convinced that his destiny had been fulfilled. He was sentenced to death by firing squad. When the judge read the sentence, he nodded, calm and certain. "Death does not frighten me," he said. "It is only the next step." His execution was carried out in secrecy later that year. Some said he refused a blindfold. Others said he smiled as the rifles were raised. Even in death, Anatoly Onoprienko left behind questions that will never be answered. Was he truly mad, or did he simply crave power in its purest form? Did he believe his own words about divine purpose, or were they a mask for emptiness? Perhaps it doesn't matter. He once told a psychiatrist, "When I kill, I feel calm. When I don't, I feel rage." That may be the most terrifying truth, that murder, for him, wasn't crime, it was peace. They called him the Terminator, but behind that name was a broken orphan who learned only how to destroy. And as Ukraine healed from his terror, one lesson remained clear. Monsters are not born fully formed. They are built, piece by piece, in silence, in neglect, until nothing human remains. In the deep south of Louisiana, where the air is heavy and the Bayou never sleeps, a quiet man lived among people who never saw him coming. He was overweight, soft-spoken, polite. He loved country music, small-town life, and weekend barbecues. His neighbors called him friendly. The police called him harmless. But for nearly a decade, Ronald Dominique was one of America's most prolific killers. They called him the Bayou Strangler. He was born in 1964 in the small town of Thibodaux, surrounded by marshes and sugarcane fields. He grew up poor and painfully shy, mocked for his weight, his stutter, and the way he walked. He never fit in. Not at school, not in church, not even at home. As a boy, he escaped through music and daydreams, places where no one could hurt him. But isolation hardened. The world became something to control, not join. After high school, Dominique drifted through odd jobs. Janitor, handyman, laborer. He rarely lasted long anywhere. He lived with his mother, cared for her when she became ill, and spent most nights alone, watching television or sitting quietly in bars along the Bayou. People thought he was strange, but harmless. That belief would cost many lives. He began killing around 1997. No one knows exactly when the first man died. His victims were poor, often homeless, mostly black or Latino. Many were gay or bisexual. They were men society ignored, and Ronald Dominique knew it. He drove the streets at night, offering rides, money, or a place to sleep. Sometimes he acted friendly. Sometimes he promised sex. Once they were inside his car or trailer, his tone changed. He handcuffed them, raped them, then strangled them with rope or tape. He dumped the bodies in swamps, ditches, and sugarcane fields, the quiet places that had raised him. The Bayou kept his secrets. For years, police didn't connect the deaths. They were scattered across parishes: Jefferson, St. Charles, Terrebonne, La Fourche. Each department handled its own cases, assuming the men had died from drugs or accidents. The victims didn't fit the image of people worth investigating. In that silence, Dominique thrived. By 2002, he had grown confident. He began experimenting, tying knots differently, moving bodies farther, adjusting his timing. He later claimed he felt sorry for some victims, but not enough to stop. He insisted the murders just happened, but investigators learned he planned everything: when to hunt, where to dump, even how to vanish afterward. He was not impulsive. He was patient. Over the years, he killed at least 23 men. Each death was quiet, invisible. Afterward, he went home, slept, and woke like nothing had happened. Neighbors said he mowed his lawn, smiled at children, helped fix fences. He went to church on Sundays. Evil had learned again how to hide in plain sight. Then, in 2006, everything began to fall apart. A man escaped his trailer alive. He told police a heavy-set stranger had offered him a ride, driven him to a trailer park, and tried to tie him up. The description matched Dominique. Detectives began surveillance and collected DNA from older crime scenes. It was a match. When confronted, Ronald Dominique broke almost immediately. He confessed through tears, describing each murder calmly, as if it were a story he barely remembered. He said he was tired of killing, tired of hiding, tired of himself. He told officers that fear had driven him, that he killed to stop men from hurting him or exposing him. But the evidence told another story. The ropes, the handcuffs, the precision, they spoke of control, not panic. He told police he sometimes prayed for God to stop him. "I asked him to kill me," he said, "so I wouldn't kill again." God stayed silent. In 2008, he pleaded guilty to 8 counts of first-degree murder to avoid execution. He received 8 consecutive life sentences without parole and was sent to Angola, the Louisiana State Penitentiary, one of the hardest prisons in the country. There, he lives quietly. Guards describe him as calm, polite, detached. He reads the Bible, eats alone, and rarely speaks. He has never shown true remorse. One investigator said, "He didn't kill because he hated. He killed because he could." The story of Ronald Dominique is one of loneliness turned lethal. He lived invisible and preyed on the invisible. He used sympathy as bait and fear as an excuse. He was not driven by passion or anger, but by emptiness, a hollow need to control something in a world that ignored him. They called him the Bayou Strangler because his crimes reflected the swamp he came from, quiet, suffocating, hidden beneath still water. No one heard the screams in the marshes. No one saw the ripples spread. And when the truth surfaced, Louisiana realized that the man they called harmless had been feeding the darkness all along. He once said, "I just wanted someone to stay, but no one ever did, so he made them stay forever." From loneliness to calm itself, another beast was waiting, hidden behind a mask. He was quiet, polite, almost grandfatherly. He smiled easily, spoke softly, and called everyone Darlene. No one looking at him would have guessed that behind that charm was the most prolific serial killer in American history. His name was Samuel Little, and the FBI called him the Chameleon Killer because no one ever saw him for what he truly was. He was born in 1940 in Reynolds, Georgia, to a teenage mother who worked as a sex worker. He never knew his father and grew up in poverty, drifting from town to town. As a child, he often slept in abandoned buildings or cheap motels. By his teens, he was stealing, fighting, and getting arrested. He dropped out of school and spent his youth in reform schools, already fascinated by fear and control. He once said he felt most alive when someone else was struggling to breathe. After his release, he became a drifter, moving across the United States with no home, no family, and no plan. He survived through theft and scams, always on the move, always watching. In every city he passed through, women disappeared. Samuel Little chose victims who lived on the edges of society, sex workers, addicts, and runaways. They were easy targets, he said, because no one looked for them when they vanished. He offered rides, food, or money, speaking softly like a friend. Once alone, he killed them with his bare hands. He never used a weapon. He strangled them, saying he liked the closeness, the silence, the control. It was like painting, he told investigators later. I was creating something that was mine. He traveled from California to Ohio, from Texas to Florida, leaving bodies in alleys, fields, and rivers. Police rarely connected the deaths. The victims came from different states and races, and their cases were often marked as overdoses or accidents. Little knew exactly how to choose women who would disappear without questions. He was arrested again and again for theft, assault, and even suspicion of murder, but always escaped conviction. He changed names, stories, and addresses constantly. He could read people, imitate their mannerisms, and become whoever he needed to be. That is why they called him the Chameleon. In the 1980s, there was no DNA system to track him. He would leave a state before anyone realized a woman was dead. You can't catch what you can't see, he once said. And for 40 years, he was right. Then, in 2012, everything changed. He was arrested in Kentucky for drug possession. When his DNA was entered into a national database, it matched evidence from 3 unsolved murders in California. The women had all been strangled. When detectives confronted him, he smiled and said, "You finally got me, huh?" At first, he confessed to 3 murders, then 5, then 10. Soon there were dozens. He remembered every detail: the streets, the weather, the shape of their faces. He described them with eerie precision, as if he were reliving each moment. Detectives said his memory was almost photographic. The FBI began working with him to identify his victims. He drew portraits of the women from memory, colored pencil sketches of faces lost to time. Each one was different: young, old, black, white, smiling, or sad. He said he wanted to give them back their names. Some believed it was guilt, others thought it was pride. By the time his confessions ended, Samuel Little had claimed 93 murders in 19 states. Investigators confirmed at least 60. It made him the most prolific serial killer in American history. He explained his pattern with chilling calm. He said he never stabbed or shot anyone because strangling left no blood, no mess. He picked women who were alone and vulnerable, those no one would believe. When asked if he ever thought about stopping, he smiled and said, "Why would I stop? It was my job." That same quiet smile was the last thing his victims ever saw. In 2014, he was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences with no chance of parole. In prison, old and frail, he continued to draw and talk about his victims, speaking of them as if they were memories, not murders. When asked if he believed in God, he said, "Yes, God gave them to me." He died in 2020 at the age of 80, still smiling, still certain. He told a guard he didn't fear death, that he had already met it many times. The story of Samuel Little is not about rage or madness, but about calculation. He understood how to disappear into the cracks of society. He knew the world ignored certain people and used that blindness to hide among them. "I never hated them," he said. "I just needed them to be quiet." And for 40 years, they were. They called him the Chameleon Killer because he changed shape wherever he went. But perhaps the name means something else. That evil can look like anything: a kind stranger, a gentle old man, a soft voice calling you darling. Because Samuel Little didn't just blend into his surroundings, he became them. And that is why, for half a century, no one ever saw him coming. In the wild expanse of America, where forests stretch for miles and lakes lie still beneath the cold, one man moved like a ghost. He left no trail, no pattern, no reason. The FBI called him Israel Keyes, the Phantom Killer. Because no one, not even the experts, could see him coming. He was born in 1978 in a remote part of Utah, one of 10 children raised in isolation. His family lived without electricity or neighbors, surviving off the land. He learned to hunt, build fires, and live unseen. He said later that he learned 2 things early: how to keep secrets and how to hurt without being caught. When he was a teenager, his family moved to Washington State. He broke into homes, stole guns, and set fires for fun. He hunted animals just to watch them die. He once told a friend he wanted to kill a person just to see what it felt like. By the time he joined the army in his 20s, the darkness was already part of him. The military taught him order and how to hide his impulses behind discipline. After leaving service, he moved to Alaska, started a construction business, and became a father. He smiled at neighbors, helped fix their roofs, and went to church. No one suspected the man living quietly among them was planning murders across the country. Keyes didn't kill out of rage or desire. He killed for control. Murder was his craft, a puzzle to perfect. He buried kill kits across America, buckets filled with weapons, duct tape, and rope. Years later, he would fly into random cities, rent a car, dig one up, and find a victim. Then he vanished again, leaving nothing behind. He didn't have a type. He killed men, women, even couples. He chose victims at random, whoever fit the moment. He said, "If you do it right, it's like they never existed." He murdered across the United States, from Vermont to Texas, leaving bodies in rivers and forests, burning or burying them in silence. The FBI confirmed at least 11 victims, but the true number remains unknown. For years, no one even knew he existed. He left no pattern, no trophies, no contacts. He watched reports about his own crimes and smiled at the confusion. He studied other killers, learned from their mistakes, and promised himself he would never be caught. For a long time, he was right. Then, in 2012, he kidnapped Samantha Koenig, an 18-year-old barista in Anchorage. He held her captive for days, then killed her and hid her body beneath the ice of a frozen lake. After her death, he demanded ransom money, using her bank card at ATMs across several states. Those security camera images, a tall man in a hood, became his undoing. Police tracked the withdrawals, followed his rental car, and arrested him in Texas. In the vehicle, they found Samantha's debit card, phone, and disguise. When questioned, he was calm. He confessed to at least 11 murders but refused to name most of his victims. He said, "I'm not here to help you. I'm here to tell you how smart I was." He laughed when asked how many kill kits existed. "More than you'll ever find," he said. The FBI called him one of the most organized killers they had ever seen. He left no trace, no fingerprints, no digital trail, no clear motive. He admitted that some of his victims would never be found, and he preferred it that way. "If you never find the body," he said, "you can't prove the crime." In December of 2012, Israel Keyes was found dead in his jail cell. He had slit his wrists and strangled himself with a sheet. On the floor lay a blood-stained note, part poem, part riddle. It ended with the words, "No one knows where I've been, no one ever will." He was right. Investigators believe there are still bodies buried across America and hidden kits waiting beneath the soil. Each one marks a ghost he created and erased. They called him the Phantom Killer because he was never truly seen. He killed without anger, without passion, without mercy. He once said he didn't believe in evil, only in efficiency. But if evil could take a form, it would look like him, calm, intelligent, and convinced that life and death were pieces on a board. For Israel Keyes, murder was not revenge, it was control. And in that control, he found his version of freedom. But monsters aren't born, they're made out of pain, neglect, and silence. Some were shaped by loneliness, some by cruelty, others by a hunger for power that no one stopped in time. They believed they were special, chosen, above the rules that bind the rest of us. And for years, they were right, until they weren't. because every monster leaves a shadow, and eventually, someone always follows it. The detectives who refused to sleep, the families who demanded answers, the survivors who spoke through fear. They are the reason we know these names, not as legends, but as warnings. It's easy to think evil is rare, that it lives far away. But the truth is quieter. It can live anywhere, in every town, in every face. The difference between good and evil isn't always a wall. Sometimes it's a single choice, one moment of mercy or the lack of it. But there are more stories, more shadows, more secrets buried beneath everyday life. So, if you want to keep descending into the darkness with us, subscribe, hit the bell, and remember, the monsters in these stories are gone, but what created them is still here, watching, waiting, just out of sight.